Welcome to A Teaspoon of Healing, where we explore the pathways to wellness and vibrant living. Listen to personal stories of healing and interviews with experts. It's time to open a doorway to healing in your life through positive changes. Here is your host, Dawn Damari.
Hi, I'm Dawn Damari, and you're listening to another episode of A Teaspoon of Healing. Well, this episode is part 2 of a series about different types of eating habits and how they worked for different people. Today's topic is zero carb, or as more popularly called, the carnivore diet. My guest, health educator and health coach Nicole Carter, has been on this show before, and she's back, and she's going to talk about how the carnivore diet healed her from ulcerative colitis and other symptoms, and she's in the best shape of her life. Nicole is also an ex-vegan, so she came to the carnivore diet after many years as whole food, plant-based, as well as raw vegan. So hear all about this right after this.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a physician or other health professional before undertaking changes in lifestyle or wellness habits. The author claims no responsibility to any person or entity for any liability, loss, or damage caused or alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of use, application, or interpretation of the information presented herein.
And before we get into our interview, let's hear from one of our sponsors, Goff Tours.
Hi, this is Goff, owner of Goff Tours, specializing in stand-up paddleboarding or surfing lessons. I even do snorkeling. You can reach me here. Orange County has what you're looking for. You can contact me via email at gofftours@gmail.com, or mobile number is 949-338-5937, gofftours.com.
Hi, I'm Dawn Damari, and you're listening to A Teaspoon of Healing. Today, my guest is Nicole Carter. She's a health coach and health educator. She was on the show previously, and she's back. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for coming back to A Teaspoon of Healing.
My pleasure.
And how's your morning so far?
Really good. Waiting for the sun to come out and get warm. I just had a lovely brunch. We made some leftover ribeye steak, some pasture-raised eggs, and wild-caught salmon.
Nice. Well, that sounds delicious.
It was amazing.
Well, so speaking of food, we're going to be talking today about different approaches, different diets. And so first of all, you came on the show, I think it was about a year ago, and we were talking about healing your gut. And from following you on social media, I noticed, and you talk a lot about this, that you are a former plant-based, and you found a lot of success with zero carb, or AKA the carnivore way of eating. And it's healed. It's been very healing for you.
Right.
And do you want to talk a little bit about your transition, how you discovered it? And
So, when I tell people this, it's shocking because it's kind of two ends of the extreme, right? And which I totally understand. But I was vegan for about 15 years. And, the first couple of years of that was great. I actually was coming off from, more of a standard diet. So I did eat more processed foods and not the healthiest, and was in college, and, so everything that entails. And so my first couple of years as a vegan, I actually did pretty good. I felt good, really couldn't complain, enjoyed it, loved eating vegan. And then I started to have problems. I started with just like my hair falling out and feeling tired and getting a lot of indigestion, gas, bloating, constipation, you name it. My stomach was hurting all the time. And then I noticed that I was very, very sensitive to anything, any kind of sugar. I became more or less hypoglycemic. And so, as I was going through the problems of the plant-based diet that I was having, I chalked it up to, maybe I needed more nutrients, and maybe I wasn't doing things right because, I thought, well, what's going wrong here? I felt good at first, and but now things are going downhill. And then those things were, like I had not I just wasn't feeling great. But then some real problems started to happen. Like I got gallstones. And when I went in to see my doctor, I went in for stomach pains, turned out to be pancreatitis, which can kill you. And they, were dumbfounded because I wasn't obese. I wasn't drinking any alcohol. And those are the common causes of pancreatitis and gallstones. And so it turned out I did have gallstones, and I was having a lot of dysfunction with my gallbladder. And ultimately, after 2 episodes of this, I had the gallbladder removed. My immune system was starting to really dysfunction. I was getting sick all the time. It was like getting the flu back to back to back, and numerous other things. I had chronic yeast infections and candida infections. So yeast in the body, skin, fatigue, and I just couldn't tolerate any kind of sugar, even wine. And then I became really sensitive to foods and smells. Just something happened in the body, and my resiliency was just not there. And, a lot of hormone problems. I had endometriosis for a number of years. I had very low thyroid function. So pretty much hypothyroidism, cold all the time, probably had to do with the hair loss. I also experienced a lot of mood swings. I would say mostly anxiety, a little bit of depression mixed in, just kind of a up and down. What else? I had quite a bit of problems. And I remember a friend saying to me, who's one of my dear friends still, who's actually now also carnivore with me. And she said to me years ago, she's like, you are the sickest healthy person that I know. And it was because I was this I used to teach at the university, and I taught herbal medicine, and I taught classes about plant-based diets. And looking back, I'm thinking, God, and I didn't realize how bad I really was until I got away from it. Because you just can't fathom that plants could be causing you harm. So after a time, my cholesterol got extremely low. I had my blood work done. That was low. I had no vitamin D in my body, even though I had been supplementing over 5,000 IUs a day for a year. I could not get my vitamin D levels up. The fatigue, my hormones were completely messed up. Very low amounts of hormones, of progesterone and testosterone. Yeah, and I just never had the energy. But all of these symptoms, more and more things just kept coming on. And I had a few different doctors that urged me to start eating some proteins, animal proteins. After I tried to convince myself that I just needed more nutrients. So if I take it to the next level, I'm going to be better. Okay. So I did raw vegan for a year, and I cut out any kind of processed carbs, or, I did about as good as you can possibly do it. Right. I mean, I left no stone unturned in the vegan world. I cut out soy. I sprouted every grain, nut, and seed that I ate. I used my dehydrator. I had flax seeds and used those for crackers, and, got a ton of fiber because I was having so much problems with my stomach and digestion. And then I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And if you're familiar with that, it's a pretty intense disease. It's autoimmune. And it was just kind of my last straw. So as much as I wanted to be vegan and plant-based for my health and for the environment, those were mainly my reasons, it just wasn't working. I just couldn't deny it anymore. So I started eating some fish and eggs. My energy levels came back. The hair loss slowed down. I did start to feel a little bit better. And I did that for a while, a few years, in fact. And I still had the colitis. I ate a ton. I mean, I would say I was mostly plant-based, and I would have a little bit of fish or eggs each day. But yet, even though some of my symptoms got better, my colitis just would still sneak up on me, and I would still get flare-ups on occasion. Yeah. So it's a pretty long, my transition was over time. And then I did do the ketogenic diet.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was there a transitionary period, keto, paleo?
My next step was that. Yeah, and I went to the ketogenic diet, and I did kind of like a more plant-based version of the keto, right? So yeah, I had a lot of coconut oil, I had a lot of eggs and fish and huge salads. I even grew my own. I had a big raised bed garden in my backyard, and I tried to eat almost everything that I grew myself. I grew a lot. with the exception of the eggs and fish. I would get my fish from my neighbor who was a fisherman, line caught. I really felt like I did it right. And so there were some other components that went into this too, I have to say. I did a lot of, I started my fasting practice back then. I started to incorporate things to manage my stress because I did go through a lot of stress over those years, and that definitely contributed. But, the ketogenic diet did seem to help. Like it did bump me up a notch, improved the gut health a bit more.
How was the fatigue? Was that a little better?
Fatigue was a little bit better, but
and the colitis?
Yeah. I mean, the colitis was definitely better. I think keto was probably the next level of progression for me than where I was. It definitely was. And I think I was getting more fats that I really needed. So it did help, but I also felt like I wasn't, I wanted to be leaner, and I worked out a lot. I taught a lot of classes, and we all have a certain amount of vanity, right? And I thought that maybe I would get leaner on the keto diet. Really felt like I wasn't satisfied, and I really wanted to heal my colitis naturally. My doctors wanted me to take all these medicines, and, having a holistic approach and being an educator and a health coach for many years, I never have used medications ever. And I didn't want to start. And I thought, how could I possibly be doing this and having gut health problems? My doctors told me there was no cure for my condition and that it did not matter what I ate. And that was like devastating for me, because I just couldn't understand how you can get a condition like that, digestive related, and it's nothing to do with food. It just didn't make any sense. And I wasn't willing to just take that answer and live with it. So I continued to try and experiment different things. I cut out this and cut out that and took a break from eggs. And, I tried different things. I went back to vegan for a few, I'd say 2-3 weeks, and I got worse. So I realized that wasn't the right direction. And then I came across a story of a lady that had used an all meat diet to heal her body from mental illness. And I know that mental illness is connected to gut health. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, is that, was that recommended to her? Because there's that connection.
Well, her name is Amber O'Hearn.
Okay. And what was it? Was it depression?
You can find her story on the internet. She's very inspiring. She's not a researcher. She's not a medical person in the health field whatsoever, but really interesting story. And she was carnivore for 9 years, only meat for 9 years. And I was blown away by this. I thought, you got to be kidding me. So I researched it for probably 3 or 4 months. I just couldn't even believe what I was hearing and reading. I thought, how can plants possibly be bad for you? Right? It's like the holy grail of health.
And that's really the message. And so finding out that people they're being healed, like it's very healing for their bodies through autoimmune and into their gut. People, mental illness,
mental health, gut health. I had read about people with my actual disease, also colitis. Read about people with joint problems and other kinds of autoimmune disease, like really common people using it for autoimmune, right? So I just said, what the hell? Like, what do I have to lose at this point? I'm still getting breakthrough flare-ups, still bleeding. When you have intestines that are bleeding and you're passing blood in your stool, it gets your attention.
I have a family member that had that, so.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah.
And you feel terrible.
Yeah, of course. And you want to do anything you can to get rid of it, especially like you said, naturally. You have a holistic approach. You're an educator, and I get that. So you started up on Carnivore. So how did you prepare for that? Because looking at it, it's definitely, you see, okay, that's a lot of meat. And is it just meat, or do people eat eggs?
The basis is in meat, beef, and ruminant animals. And I'll explain that. But so before this, I hadn't eaten beef for years, like, I don't know, years and many, many years. And so it was almost unthinkable.
Right.
But so I tried a little chicken, and I just never been a big fan of chicken. I, went back to eating the fish and the eggs, little bit of like dark meat chicken that went down okay, but I just never really was a fan of chicken.
Right.
So I went ahead and started trying a little bit of ground beef, bison. I think bison was my first real success, where I was like, wow, I actually feel really good. My first carnivore meal was a bowl full of browned ground bison meat.
Okay.
And just with some salt on it. And I was amazed at actually how good I felt. took me a long time to wrap my head around this,
Mm-hmm.
but I repeated and repeated and repeated. And like my symptoms went less and less and less. And so all this time, and I continue to watch and research because this is not an area that anybody is a real expert in because there isn't any kind of, long-term studies.
Not yet.
We can,
in the future, it takes so many years of studies, for.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So right now, so you started doing that. And so a couple months in, how did you feel? And also I wanted to ask you, is it a lot to do with fasting? I find that, it's the fed and fasted state. So when you're eating meat, more dense protein, are you able to fast longer? Is it, because it seems like it's a lot to do with fasting. So what is usually a typical couple days?
Well, okay. So when you eat meat and fat, which is not to say you're adding extra fat, just meat that has higher amounts of saturated fat, it balances out your blood sugar and you're satiated for a long time. So my intermittent fasting became really longer and much easier. Right. So I could go 18, 20 hours, no problem. Wasn't even hungry.
Okay.
So I would eat an early dinner, which would be some sort of meat. And early on, I think I started off with mostly beef and bison. I started eating the meat. I couldn't believe how well I digested it. It tasted great. I did not have any aversions to it. But, for people coming from plant-based diet, I get that question a lot. And I did, like I said, I started with fish and eggs for quite a while. So I did do fish and eggs and then thigh meat, chicken, and then finally bison and then beef. So it wasn't, one day vegan for 15 years and then boom, full meat every single day. It was a little slower than that. And I will say, I felt great on it. You do get a little bit of loose stools for the first few weeks. It's real common.
I was going to ask about that. How that goes.
You get much reduced stools because your body you're not using fiber, right? Your body actually doesn't need fiber.
So some people are saying that's why they're kind of afraid to try it because they're afraid they won't be able to.
I try to avoid dairy. You shouldn't have that problem at all. Meat is very well digested. Your body uses it. And because there's no fiber, you just go to the bathroom less.
Right.
And so people, I think, are hooked on this idea that, it's healthy to go to the bathroom and have, like the more bowel movements that you have, the better. It's not necessarily true. No. And it's actually, fiber is really destructive to your gut. And this is what I really learned is when I took all of the plant foods out of my diet is when I finally truly healed my gut.
So you have,
and that's a really hard thing for people to understand.
A lot of people are just be like, what? That's exactly the opposite of what I hear from all the journals and all the, if you're in a dietetics program or any a traditional nutrition program, they're going to say, no, it's absolutely wrong. So, so how is it that you feel that, so obviously, your health has improved.
Yeah. I mean, this is a difficult thing to wrap your mind around. I don't think carnivore is for everybody. It's one of the biggest struggles is mentally accepting it, understanding what you're doing. And it really takes a lot of support and you got to research it and know that it's the best thing for you. And I've done all that and I've experienced it. And I'm 100% convinced that this is the best thing for me. And I do think it is the best thing for a lot of people and for the environment. If you do it right, it can be a really amazing way of living and healing for so many people. So, yes, there was a transition, but immediately I felt great. I would have occasionally some symptoms in my gut health. So that for colitis means like, the bleeding went away. So fewer and fewer and fewer episodes of that. And you get these little stomach pains. Those went away. And after about 4 months, everything completely stopped. Like no symptoms, feeling great, energized. I honestly don't have a single thing wrong with me anymore. And for the first time in my life, like that's why I think I was so obsessed with health when I was younger is because I was always trying to be healthy and I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I was always trying to solve something and I was taking every supplement possible and studying every herbal medicine and what kind of diet and taking my, vegan diet and raw food diet to the nth degree, trying to find that place where I was free of problems with my health. And I just could never do it. And so, I was just saying to my boyfriend just yesterday that it's almost amazing how much we take for granted. And I'm feeling so great now. And I look back and I'm so grateful that I have was open-minded enough to try this because all of my health problems are gone. And it's almost not normal to be that way, right? Everybody you know has something they're dealing with, and I don't anymore. So it's been a really incredible journey. It's been very eye-opening to see how vicious people get when you challenge this idea of plant-based diets. And I don't do it to challenge anybody. I just want people to know that there are other ways of doing things. And if you are struggling with a health condition, then you may need to be more open-minded for a minute and try something. And it might not happen overnight, but you could find some really amazing success if what you're doing isn't working. Yeah. So
how do you convince somebody? Well, first of all, here's a question. So some people may ask, what about your blood work?
So my cholesterol was a little bit higher than it was before. So, right around the 200-ish range. Yeah, by the way, cholesterol, the numbers of cholesterol and what is healthy and what is not was made by the companies that make statins, establishing the guidelines. So that's where that cholesterol number, what is healthy, has gotten to be a lower and lower and lower number, in my opinion, to sell more statins because it's a very big business.
And there's still so much misleading stuff. They had another new study recently saying, oh no, now you shouldn't eat eggs, but it was not a causational study. It was a observational study over many years. People just self-reporting, and that's what they usually are with nutrition studies. But like you said, it increased a little bit, but not a lot. So that's, I guess those are the people that would have more concern, that were already a higher rate.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, my LDLs went down and my HDLs went up. I had perfect blood measure. My cholesterol was around 200. Blood pressure is great. My hormones, I haven't had my estrogen or progesterone tested or my testosterone since, but I did get my thyroid tested. I posted my numbers actually on my Instagram, but now my thyroid is perfect. My doctor even says they're perfect. You don't need anything now. And I do feel so much better. So I more put it on how I feel. And, do we know what this will be long-term? No, but I can't argue with the success of healing everything in my body, having great energy, finally sleeping. I had insomnia for a long time, losing a lot of excess body fat. I was never heavy, but I got, leaner, and body fat is not a healthy thing to have a lot of. It's where we store our toxins. But just having the normal functions of my body and feeling mentally stable and clear and calm and, all those things together are really hard to argue with. Do I know what the long-term effects will be? No. But I do keep an eye on things. And if I had something that comes up, I would still be as open-minded as I was when I initiated this, which is maybe something needs to change. But so far, I've been carnivore for 1 year in May. In May, I'll be having eaten nothing but meat for 1 year. And all I can say is my health and my life has just gotten better and better and better and better every month that passes. And I'm just utterly amazed. And I get, now I promote it on my Instagram because I want people to know things that I never thought of when I was plant-based, such as—
What are a couple things?
So here's the big ones. Let's hear them. These are very controversial. So eating plant-based is not going to save the environment.
Okay, yeah. And why is that? And I've heard both sides of that. So
I learned a lot from the Savory Institute, and you can search that up online. But so the deal is is part of our environmental issues are lack of water, running out of farmland, topsoil, and it's from over farming. And yes, factory farms do contribute, but they don't contribute as much as we've previously thought. But they do contribute to toxins in the water, right? From like hormones and antibiotics and things like that. So I'm not promoting factory farms. What I do promote is using pasture raised animals. So biodynamic farms help replenish the soil just by using the animals. So basically the animals graze on the land, they pee and poop on the land, they fertilize it, and then they move on. And that's how the land is restored. So if we actually want to do something for the environment, it's to support the farming of pasture-raised animals, and that will heal the planet. It really will. I've done a lot of reading on this, and I'm convinced that that's a far better method. Is it enough to feed the world? I don't know, but I do know that it's far better than all of the agriculture and the monocropping and the plowing and the over-farming of our lands that are cleared, which many animals die in the process of and lose their habitat, and watersheds are damaged, and, water's dammed and derailed. Fish die, wildlife, birds. I mean, you name it. It's not a cruelty-free zone just by growing plants. It's a common misconception. And I know about this because I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a farm in Michigan, and I remember all of everything that goes into farming. We grew soybeans in Michigan. So I do have a good understanding of this. And so that's one reason. And the other thing is, my belief was that eating plants was the most nutritious thing for me. This is how I'm going to get the most nutrients, right? I think a lot of plant-based people believe that. What's better than eating kale or juicing? Well, the reality is our digestive systems aren't designed to absorb those kind of foods, right? The nutrients in those foods. One, we're not designed to handle all that fiber, so it's very destructive on the gut. And the forms of these nutrients that are in plants aren't assimilable to our bodies. We can't assimilate them like a ruminant animal. So kale is not for human consumption.
Okay.
It's for a ruminant animal, like lamb, right? Or goats or cows. Actually I think it was bred for goats to eat and for lambs. And so they can digest these. They can handle the fiber because they have a rumen. We do not. And so they absorb those nutrients. And then when we eat their animal byproducts, their meat, their milks, we absorb those nutrients. Same with eggs. And we absorb them in a form that's much more bioavailable. So believe it or not, meat like pasture-raised beef, lamb, bison, the animals that are eating clean grass, bugs, nature, those are the most nutrient-dense foods you can eat. You get far more nutrients in that than any kind of vegetable. And you don't need as much. And it doesn't require very much water at all to raise those animals. So these are some really important points that, for me, this was my reason for being vegan. I need to get as much nutrients as possible. I need to do my part to help tread lightly on the earth and save the planet.
Yeah, that's what a lot of...
Yeah, and I totally get that. I want to do that still. And I'm cautious now as a carnivore. There's people that do it different ways. I personally try to buy as much grass-fed. We had bison the other night. We had venison from a friend who's a hunter, line-caught fish, wild salmon from a friend. We are fortunate in that way. But I think those things are really important if you're eating...
Yeah. I was wondering about, like where people should source it because of all the information about, conventionally raised meat. No.
Yeah. A lot of people just eat conventionally raised hamburger or steaks every day and call it good. I think for health purposes, it's short-sighted. I think you're missing out on some omega fatty acids. So that's why I like to incorporate organ meats. Also, pasture-raised eggs. I would never eat factory farmed eggs ever. Not worth it. Same with chicken. But, your ruminant animals are highly nutritious. Eggs, the yolks is what you want. And that gives you a ton of nutrients. Also fat, grass-fed butter. I don't really do dairy, but you can get raw dairy products if you like. Some people do good with it. Some don't. And so these are the most nutritious and the best for the environment. I mean, I don't like the idea of factory farming because the conditions and
I was wondering about that. The people that
there is chemicals running into the water and
the conditions of the animals. So if there's people that they just don't want to deal with that, that's some people can't.
Yeah. So that's why I recommend eating bison and lamb. You can buy that at any grocery store. And those are traditionally not factory farmed.
Oh, I didn't know that. So no lamb is. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Not normally. I mean, is there a factory farm out there? Perhaps. I don't know. But most part, those animals are not typically factory farmed.
Okay.
So you can do that. But you do want to eat those ruminant animals, like you wouldn't like pescatarian. Do I think that's the healthiest choice? No, because I think you're missing out on a lot of the nutrients that come from the ruminant animals because they're eating those greens that we are trying to eat and absorb nutrients from, and we can't.
Right.
So I do believe there is a right way, a best way to do carnivore, but you'll find that many people approach it differently. Some eat a little bit of vegetables here and there. I think, some people can do that. I personally have not because I want to make sure my gut is fully healed before I, incorporate any other foods in there. But it's not to say that you can't have some berries here and there. And there's some discussion about, whether we get vitamin C, because it's not a lot in meat. And however, there's people that have been eating nothing but beef for 9, 10 years plus and have never had scurvy or anything like that. So I think it's questionable. We just don't know yet. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with eating a little bit of, I think buying your broccoli that was grown on a monocrop thousands of miles away is no better than eating factory farmed beef, right? Mm-hmm. You're still contributing to environmental problems by doing that. But hey, if you've got a farmer's market that's local and you've got some wild berries or out by you, and then I think some of those make sense.
Right, I see.
Yes. Those we can eat and digest. So those are two main reasons that I think I come up against a lot. And believe me, I don't want to convince anybody. I want people to convince themselves that this is the right thing for them. One thing that I always talk about in what I teach in far as coaching and wellness is that you have to listen to your body.
Yes.
And I think that was the thing that I didn't do for a long time is I was so dead set on being vegan and being plant-based that my body was screaming, but I didn't listen because I was fixated on this boxed in idea of, this dogmatic idea of what it meant to be healthy. And we're still there. And I come from the healthcare field. I've been in healthcare field for 17 years. Mm-hmm. And this has been the message, and it's still the message. I work in corporate wellness now for a very large healthcare company, and they still promote the message, and they're trying to go more plant-based.
Yes. Yeah, I did notice that is the trend. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's really difficult for me because I think.
So how do you deal with that?
Well, one by one, I share my story on my social media, and I tell my story all the time because I know I'm not the only one, mm-hmm. and I get bombarded with messages about, oh my gosh, this was me. Oh my gosh, I've been plant-based, and they want to be,
yes,
but they're suffering. Mm-hmm. They're having so many health problems and nobody can understand why. So I think this is why. And so I'll say my mission right now is to raise awareness about the problems with a plant-based diet and that it might not be a good idea for everybody and probably isn't a good idea for most people because it's very hard on your gut. And without gut health, there is no health. The food industry has a lot to gain off of us eating plant-based and a lot of grain-based foods because, they have money in there. There's financial ties and there's huge margins in those foods and subsidies. So you have to take that into consideration. If you're not feeling well on something, but the government is telling you to eat that, why? And if we know that it causes diabetes and, other digestive problems, why are we told to eat that? There's a lot of things about that don't mix. And also we've relied for years, and I know this from my graduate studies are in epidemiology and public health.
Right.
And one thing that we always studied was all of the nutrition information is on epidemiology. And there also have been many longitudinal studies gone out to prove that saturated fat and meats are unhealthy for us and cause disease. But you know what? None of them have been able to prove it. So the Framingham study, famous study, 40 years or so, they tracked people and they still couldn't prove that these foods were unhealthy. It was a massive failure and a financial waste, proving nothing. And the Women's Health Initiative, same thing. Many, many years following individuals to see what they eat. They didn't find anything. And also these reports are self-reported. Yeah, epidemiology is not reliable. And the only other research that, you really can do is the gold standard, which is double-blind, placebo-controlled trials. Mm-hmm. And those are very expensive to conduct. So who's going to pay for those? Someone that stands to benefit from the result. And I'll tell you what, it's not going to be a food company. It's not going to be somebody that has ties to food companies because nobody wants to find research that makes them look bad. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes into this. And I will say this is a can of worms. If you're not doing well on a plant-based diet, be open-minded and do your own research. I don't want to convince anybody. I just want people to be open-minded enough to do their own research and try something new because I don't know I'd still be suffering if I hadn't done that. And I'm cured of all my diseases. I feel amazing at 44, better than I ever have in my life. It's really hard to argue with that. I've seen miraculous changes in other people close to me, and stories of people all over the world curing their body. So I think this is something that cannot be ignored. And so I promote it on my social media in my coaching business, which I've had for many years before I was ever carnivore. I have now incorporated a lot of this work, and I've had awesome results. It's really kind of a paradigm shift, I think. And to come from a plant-based diet and, for many years on a plant-based diet and being so entrenched in that, it's really, really hard to think that this opposite way of eating could possibly be right. It's very hard to wrap your mind around that.
I really appreciate you coming on the show and bringing a different point of view.
My pleasure. I'm sure that you're going to have a lot of people that listen to this and think it is absolutely crazy and will disagree, and that's okay. But for those people that are struggling and are open-minded enough, just there's a little crack in the door that they might be willing to look into it just for themselves.
And where can people get a hold of you if they want to explore this more? And you offer coaching programs.
Yeah, I do. So they can go to my website, which is healthywithnicole.com. You can find my digital programs there, and you can also sign up for one-on-one coaching. I write a lot of articles, and so there's some information there they can look at. And then they can also find me on Instagram. I do a lot of work on Instagram, and it's Healthy with Nicole. I also have a YouTube channel, also Healthy with Nicole. And this is a little bit more diverse. I do a lot of DIY skincare so that people can avoid toxins. I do some cooking. I do a lot on stress management and fasting, because I find that to be incredibly helpful for health and well-being. And so, more broad in my work of health and well-being. Those 3 locations, anybody can find out more about what I do.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for joining me today on A Teaspoon of Healing and sharing your wisdom and your story. And I know people will benefit from it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Teaspoon of Healing. If you have any questions for me or for Nicole, visit my website, teaspoonofhealing.com, click on contact, and there's a form there. I'll get back to you. You can also visit my Instagram. I'm very active on there at Teaspoon of Healing, or facebook.com/Teaspoon of Healing. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening to A Teaspoon of Healing with Dawn Damari, your home for wellness and vibrant living. For more resources on wellness and vibrant living, visit us online at teaspoonofhealing.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Please consult a physician or other health professional before undertaking changes in lifestyle or wellness habits. The author claims no responsibility to any person or entity for any liability, loss, or damage caused or alleged to be caused directly or indirectly as a result of use, application, or interpretation of the information presented herein.
Susan, you remember the time we were in Orange County? We were driving around and we got lost, and we ran into this place called
Avila's El Ranchito.
You remember the place? The place had awesome decor and authentic margaritas.
Did you know that Avila's El Ranchito has been around since 1966? They have 13 locations throughout Orange County. Visit Salvador Avila's location in Lake Forest and Foothill Ranch for great food, ambiance, and specialty margaritas.